You won't believe what I overheard late one night. Stay with me till the end to find out how one unexpected discovery turned my entire life upside down. It all started on an ordinary Thursday evening. I was in my home office finishing up some work when I heard Sarah, my wife of 10 years, talking on the phone in the kitchen. At first, it sounded like any other conversation, but then I caught something that made my heart skip a beat. She laughed, a kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. "It was so good to see you again. You always know how to make me feel special," she said. I froze, my hand gripping the pen I was holding. Who was she talking to? And why did she sound so nostalgic? I quietly moved closer to the kitchen, careful not to make a sound. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing. I've been careful." The pen slipped from my fingers and hit the floor, making a faint noise. I quickly backed away, trying to process what I'd just heard. Was this real? Was Sarah, my wife, my partner, keeping something from me? When she came back into the living room, she acted like nothing had happened. "What's for dinner?" she asked casually, as if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell on my world. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, trying to decide whether to confront her or wait to gather more information. I decided to play it cool. If she was hiding something, I needed to know the whole truth. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to her behavior. She was on her phone a lot more, always tilting the screen away when I walked by. She started leaving the house at odd hours, claiming she was running errands or meeting up with friends. Something wasn't adding up, and I wasn't going to let it slide. You won't believe what I found when I decided to dig deeper. Stick around to see how the truth started unraveling right before my eyes. The more I observed Sarah, the more suspicious her behavior became. It wasn't just the phone calls or the sudden errands. There was a noticeable change in her demeanor. She seemed distant, distracted, almost as if she were living in a different world. One evening, while she was in the shower, I saw her phone on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at it. I had never invaded her privacy before, but something inside me screamed that I needed answers. I hesitated, but then I saw a notification light up the screen. A message from someone named AJ. It read, "I miss you too. When can we meet again?" I felt a rush of adrenaline and anger. My hands shook as I quickly unlocked her phone. The message thread was short, but the contents were damning. Messages like, "Last night was amazing," and "I can't stop thinking about you." I could feel the room spinning. My wife, the woman I had trusted with my life, was having an affair. But who was AJ? I needed more information, so I took photos of the messages for proof. Then I put the phone back exactly where I found it. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I wasn't proud of it, but I knew I couldn't confront Sarah without hard evidence. If I was going to address this betrayal, I needed the full picture. The investigator worked quickly. Within days, he provided me with a name: Andrew Johnson, her ex-boyfriend from years ago. They had reconnected recently, and it wasn't just casual. They had been meeting at a cafe on the other side of town, and he had even been to her home when I wasn't there. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. How long had this been going on? How could she look me in the eyes and lie every single day? But I wasn't going to lose control. I had the facts now, and it was time to confront her. You won't believe how she reacted when I confronted her. Stay till the end to see the shocking truth that came out of our conversation. That evening, I waited for Sarah to come home. I had spent the entire day preparing myself mentally, replaying the confrontation in my head over and over again. When she walked through the door, acting as if everything was fine, I felt a wave of anger and sadness. But I kept my composure. I wasn't going to let her see me unravel. "Hey," I said calmly. "Can we talk for a minute?" She looked at me, slightly startled by my tone. "Sure. What's up?" she asked, placing her bag on the counter. I motioned for her to sit down, and as she did, I placed the printed photos of her messages with Andrew Johnson on the table. Her face turned pale as she glanced at them. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. She didn't respond right away. Her mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came out. Finally, she muttered. I can explain. Explain what? That you've been sneaking around with your ex? That you've been lying to me for God knows how long. Tears started to well up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she stammered. It just happened. I didn't mean to hurt you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It just happened? I repeated. Sarah, this isn't some mistake. You've been meeting him, messaging him, bringing him into our lives while pretending everything was fine. Do you even realize what you've done? She started to cry, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook. Why, Sarah? Why him? Why anyone? I don't know, she sobbed. I was unhappy. We've been distant. I don't know. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. If you were unhappy, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't we try to fix things instead of you turning to him? She didn't have an answer. She just sat there, crying and looking at the floor. I stood up, unable to take it anymore. I trusted you, Sarah. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? She reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled away. I need some time to think, I said firmly. And until I figure out what to do next, I think you should stay somewhere else. She looked shocked but didn't argue. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of the situation. Little did I know, the real twists were still to come. You won't believe what I discovered after she moved out. Stay with me to uncover the shocking twist that changed everything I thought I knew. After Sarah left the house that night, I was left with a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and relief. I thought the worst was behind me, but I was wrong. The next morning, I decided to dig deeper into her relationship with Andrew Johnson. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I reached out to the private investigator again and asked him to keep monitoring their activities. A few days later, he sent me something I never expected: photos. Andrew wasn't just some ex-flame trying to reignite an old romance. He was married too. And not only that, his wife had no idea about the affair. I stared at the images, stunned. Andrew and Sarah weren't just betraying me, they were betraying his wife as well. It made my blood boil. This wasn't just a personal matter anymore. It was a web of lies and deceit that hurt more people than I realized. I debated whether to reach out to Andrew's wife. Would it be crossing a line? But the more I thought about it, the more I felt she deserved to know the truth. So I did it. I found her contact information through a little digging and sent her an anonymous message with the evidence I had. A part of me hesitated. What if it made things messy, eh? But deep down, I knew she deserved to know the betrayal she was living with. A day later, I got a call from an unknown number. Is this the person who sent me the pictures? A woman's voice asked, trembling. Yes, I replied cautiously. I'm Andrew's wife, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you for telling me. I had no idea. We talked for nearly an hour, exchanging stories and piecing together the timeline. It turned out Andrew had been lying to her for months, just like Sarah had been lying to me. She was heartbroken but determined to take action. After that conversation, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie with her, as though we were both soldiers in the same battle against deceit. But little did I know, this revelation would set off a chain of events that neither of us could have predicted. You won't believe how the confrontation with Andrew unfolded. Stick around to see how one shocking revelation flipped everything on its head. A week after my conversation with Andrew's wife, she and I decided it was time to confront him and Sarah together. We coordinated our plans carefully. She invited Andrew to a cafe under the pretense of needing to talk, while I brought Sarah to the same location, claiming I wanted to meet on neutral ground. The stage was set. Sarah and I arrived first, and as we sat down, she looked uneasy. What's this about? She asked, fidgeting with her hands. Before I could answer, Andrew walked in with his wife, Lisa. The moment Sarah saw him, her face turned white. She quickly looked away, but there was no escaping what was about to happen. Andrew froze when he saw both of us sitting there. What's going on? He stammered, glancing nervously at Lisa. Lisa, visibly holding back her anger, placed the evidence on the table, the photos, the text messages, everything. Care to explain this, Andrew? She asked, her voice trembling but firm. Andrew's face flushed red. Lisa, I can explain. Don't bother, I interrupted. We've all heard enough lies. The truth is right here. Sarah tried to speak, but I cut her off. How could you do this to me? To us? Was it worth it, Sarah? She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I never wanted it to go this far, she mumbled. Lisa slammed her hand on the table. Far? You've been sneaking around with my husband for months. Did you ever think about what this would do to your families? The cafe grew silent as other patrons started to notice the tension. Andrew tried to grab Lisa's hand, but she pulled away. Don't you dare, she said. You don't get to play the victim here. I turned to Sarah, my voice steady, but filled with emotion. This is the last time I let you humiliate me. I'm done. Lisa, now in tears but resolute, stood up and faced Andrew. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm taking everything I can. You've destroyed this marriage. Andrew's face turned to panic. Lisa, please, let's talk about this. She didn't even look back as she walked out of the cafe. I stood up next, looking Sarah in the eye one last time. I trusted you, and you threw it all away. Goodbye, Sarah. I left without waiting for her response. As I stepped outside, I felt a mix of sadness and liberation. The confrontation was over, but the journey to healing had just begun. You won't believe what happened after the confrontation. Stick with me to see how the fallout changed all of our lives in ways no one expected. After the explosive confrontation at the cafe, I focused on rebuilding my life. But just when I thought it was all behind me, Sarah showed up at my door. She looked disheveled, a shadow of the confident woman I once knew. Can we talk? She asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated, but eventually let her in. She sat down at the table, her hands shaking. I know I've lost your trust, she began, but I need you to hear me out. I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair. I'm listening. She started to explain her actions, claiming she felt neglected in our marriage, and turned to Andrew for attention. It was never about love, she said. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I could see the regret in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. Sarah, I said firmly, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a series of choices, every one of them leading to this betrayal. You don't get to rewrite history to make yourself the victim. Tears streamed down her face. I don't want to lose you, she said. Please, give me another chance. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I sighed, feeling the weight of her words, but knowing in my heart what needed to be done. Sarah, it's too late. Trust isn't something you can just patch up after it's been shattered. I deserve better, and so do you. She cried harder, but this time I didn't feel guilty. I had made my decision, and there was no going back. Meanwhile, Lisa had followed through on her promise. She filed for divorce from Andrew, and through a mutual friend, I learned that she had won the house, custody of their children, and a significant portion of his assets. Andrew's life was unraveling faster than he could control. I focused on myself, my career, my friends, and my own healing. I started therapy, something I never thought I'd do, and it helped me process the betrayal and rebuild my confidence. Months passed, and one day, I received an unexpected message from Lisa. She thanked me for having the courage to reach out to her and suggested we meet for coffee. When we met, it wasn't awkward at all. In fact, we shared a lot of laughs and found comfort in each other's company. It was refreshing to talk to someone who truly understood what I had been through. Little did I know, that meeting would mark the beginning of a surprising new chapter in my life. You won't believe how this story ends. Stick with me to see the unexpected twist that brought everything full circle. Over the next few months, Lisa and I continued to meet occasionally. What started as a shared bond over betrayal slowly turned into something deeper. We talked about everything, not just the past, but our hopes, dreams, and what we wanted out of life. I was cautious, though. After what I'd been through, trust didn't come easily. Lisa understood that because she was navigating the same struggles. We took things slow, allowing time to heal the wounds left by Sarah and Andrew. Meanwhile, Sarah reached out a few more times, each message filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. But I stood firm in my decision. I knew going back would only reopen old wounds. One day, while going through some old things, I found a letter Sarah had written during the early days of our marriage. In it, she had talked about how much she loved me and how she wanted to build a life together. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, thinking about how far we had strayed from those promises. But then I realized something important. People change, and sometimes the best thing you can do is let go. Lisa and I grew closer with each passing day. She had filed for her divorce, finalized everything, and was now focused on her kids and her new independence. She was strong, resilient, and determined to rebuild her life, and that inspired me. A year after the confrontation, Lisa and I decided to take a trip together. It wasn't romantic at first. We both needed to get away and celebrate how far we'd come. But during that trip, something shifted. One evening, as we sat by a quiet lake, she turned to me and said, "I never thought I'd be happy again after everything that happened. But here I am, and a big part of that is because of you." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "I think we saved each other," I replied. That moment marked the beginning of something new, not just a relationship, but a chance to create a future built on honesty, trust, and shared experiences. Looking back, the betrayal that once felt like the end of the world turned out to be the catalyst for a new, better chapter in my life. Sarah and Andrew had made their choices, and they had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had finally found peace, and unexpectedly, a new kind of happiness. Please share your opinion by commenting here, like, and subscribe.